Where will realignment hit next? Well, certainly the ACC is a prime target. Will Virginia be part of that mix? We got Jackie Franchuli on the line here at the Voice of College Football. You can catch Jackie's work at Wahoo's 247 Sports. Jackie, good to see you. What's going on these days?
Good to see you too. Just getting ready for the upcoming season. I mean, ACC media days are fast approaching. They're about 2.5 weeks away almost. So, yeah, just counting down to football season right now.
Realignment, of course, is at the forefront of what's happening in the ACC right now. Clemson and Florida State are making their stands in court. It would take a miracle for them to stay within the conference, you would think. It seems as though it's just a matter of when and how much money. And then even North Carolina has come out in the last few months to say, hey, we need to leave this conference. And the attachment team, I'll go to USC, UCLA, for North Carolina seems to be a lot of people tab NC State, a lot of people tabbing Virginia. A lot of great qualifications with academics. The basketball team just won a national championship a few years ago, and the population is surging. And just your thoughts about what Virginia brings to the table in totality.
Sure. I mean, the Olympics is around the corner, and Virginia is pretty much making up a quarter of the women's swim team in the Olympics. Gretchen Walsh is the athlete of the year. So she's a Virginia alum. You look at Wimbledon, and you have a Virginia tennis player making it to next round, beating number 2 player in the country, Navarro. So you have a lot of the Olympic sports that don't get a lot of publicity. Obviously, they do with the Olympics and Wimbledon. But those are some of the Virginia athletes as well that can get some, national recognition in the conference that they do eventually end up with. Because I do think Virginia will likely leave the ACC with UNC. That's been something that, we reported on 2 years ago when this whole realignment stuff, I was reporting on Wahoo's 24/7 that there looked like to be a relationship there. And Virginia, AD Carla Williams, through some of the sources, and President Ryan, were some of the first ones to start talking about what was going on at the ACC. And they kind of were one of those groups of the 7 groups that the 7 teams are kind of discussing the future there. I think Virginia is one of those teams that, like you said, the population in the DC area and just in the state of Virginia, this East area, that people do feel like it's like nice for like Big Ten to kind of gain some grounds. The SEC, I do feel like the SEC would be I know it might be weird for me to people say because they think of the accreditation and all the academics in the Big Ten. But I think culture wise, I think when you think of the South, I think Virginia might fit that ACC a little bit better in that regard than baseball, obviously, with UVA baseball going to Omaha. Brian O'Connor has done a great job with the baseball program. So the only question mark for Virginia would be their men's lacrosse program that win national titles. They don't really do that in the SEC for the men's lacrosse. So that's the question mark there. But then baseball, Big Ten. So Virginia right now, when you talk about realignment, you see that there is an argument of why they should join other conferences and why other conferences would like Virginia to join them. I know the football conversation, they haven't been very successful in the last decade, but when you look at the other things that Virginia offers when it comes to raising the overall conference GPA, it's either the other sports. When you look at the SEC, they want to win every single sport they play. They want to win everything. And you have Virginia that comes with a lot of these sports that have won national championships in recent years and have dominated the last few years, like women's swimming, like men's tennis. These are the sort of thing that Virginia can go up. Hey, we have several athletes that are on the national stage. They have a Virginia women's soccer player that is on the women's soccer team for the Olympics. So those are the things that people will be discussing when they talk about realignment when it comes to Virginia.
Jackie, before Virginia was significantly in the news connected to North Carolina for a possible move outside the conference, I would think that your typical college football fan or college sports fan, when asked who would be attached to North Carolina, the 2 schools that would come to mind would be Duke because of the obvious basketball rivalry, and NC State because that's obviously the school in state. North Carolina State, they're football rivals that play on the final weekend of the season, and that seems to be a connection that football fans make, that if you play that rivalry game like Virginia Tech, then there's that association there. So why do you think Virginia, and you mentioned and covered much of this ground, but Virginia would be a better selection for a conference outside the ACC?
Well, two things. When it comes to the rivalry, even Virginia will say that Virginia UNC is a UNC game is one they circle on their calendars because it is the South's oldest rivalry. So that there is that legend, there's that historical factor there that there is a rivalry well across several sports, not just basketball. I guess culture when you look at that sort of regard. So that if you bring UNC demographic there, we get that DMA, you get that market. You get that Virginia market.
So, Jackie, you run down all the success aside from football athletically, and it's extremely impressive. We think first and foremost in terms of the money, the eyeballs, and the attention, it goes to football, especially if the moves to the SEC or the Big Ten. Is there hope? Of course, there's always hope, but reasonable hope that this football program can be viable in one of those two leagues?
Yeah, I think if you look at what Virginia has done in the last few years as far as investment into the program, I mean, they just opened up a new football building, which has its new weight room, nutrition area. I mean, that will at least stop the negative recruiting against Virginia. I mean, when you're going up against other ACC programs, they already had a building for years. It certainly hurts you when you're doing a compare and contrast. So having that investment and showing recruits, hey, we are investing in this program certainly does help. The next step for Virginia is trying to see how you compete in this NIL world. The good news is Virginia changed their state law. So now we can talk about the universities having some sort of hand into NIL because of this new law that Governor Youngkin signed in the summer, and it just started in July 1st. So that's new for Virginia, and we're trying to see what Virginia and Virginia Tech both will be doing when it comes to NIL because of that new legislation. So that's still to be determined. But you have that in their pocket now. You have a good, nice recruiting area for Virginia. If they suddenly start winning games, you have a nice hotbed in the Virginia Beach Tidewater area, Norfolk area. You're also really close to the DC metro area. Maryland produces a lot of good prospects. You have a lot of prep schools that Virginia should have some pipelines. That's what the staff is trying to do anyways, those prep schools. So they have what it takes, as in they have like the tools necessary. Is about all of these coming together and not falling behind. What happened to Virginia in the last 10 years, and ironically, my first job out of college was covering UVA. I started off at a local station here in Charlottesville during the Mike London tenure. And I remember my first day on the job was seeing the indoor practice facility opened up and taking a tour of it. Virginia was one of the first schools to have it. I mean, I remember covering the Gators a couple of years later and having the same type of tour at their indoor practice facility. So UVA had an indoor practice facility before an SEC program. Then fast forward now, and they're just getting done with their building and the football operations center, and they're just talking about NIL. You need to be ahead of the curve when it comes to college football. If you're a team like UVA, if you're Alabama, you have other resources at your disposal. For UVA, you need to be ahead of the game, or at least within that first or second group. They were behind a lot when it comes to the facilities. So that is the key thing for Virginia if you want to succeed. The other key is try to figure out how to win the transfer portal era, because the issue that Virginia has is Virginia's transfer issue is it's very cut down. So when you see thousands of players in a transfer, I probably would say only a quarter of them can even get into Virginia. And this is not about GPA. It's about credits. Virginia does not have many majors compared to other schools. So the credits and don't really align. So you can have a 4.0 GPA in another program and not be able to get into Virginia. Most of the time, you're looking at freshmen, maybe redshirt freshman, like sophomore, you're kind of cutting it close, or guys who are grad transfers. And then if they're grad transfers, you got to pray that they get into the grad program that they want at Virginia. And the business school and the law school, two of the schools that generally have a lot of guys wanting to go to, are notoriously difficult to get in if you're a football player. So again, there's a lot of things that Virginia as an institution need to figure out, because those are the hurdles that they're facing.